Hi, everybody, and welcome to TechCabal's TC Live. My name is Olumuyiwa Ologwega. Every week or about every week, TechCabal's TC Live talks to pretty interesting people in technology who are building things we consider interesting. So we sit down, we talk to them, we allow you ask them questions. At the end of the day, the aim is just to get smarter and to just get the thinking about how many of these things are built. So last week, we spoke to Tosi Eniolorunda. He's the CEO of TMAP, a fintech company. Today, we're having pretty much another interesting conversation. We're speaking to Yanmo Omorogbe. She is the co-founder and the chief operating officer at Bamboo, a fintech app. Bamboo lets you buy stocks on the Nigerian stock exchange, as well as the stock exchanges in the US as well. I remember that when I saw the draft for a briefing, in-house briefing for this conversation, I remember that last year, Jumia was trading at around $4 or $5 or so. It was the lowest price it had been since its IPO. And I was so tempted to buy a few units of Jumia. If I'd wanted to do that, I'd have had to use an app like Bamboo, or I'd have had to use, an app that looks like Bamboo. 10, 20 years ago, that would not have been possible. So it should give you some perspective as to how much this product has changed our access to building wealth and access to preserving capital for a lot of people. Like I said before, Yanmo Omorogbe is the COO and co-founder at Bamboo, which is a fintech app, pretty great fintech app. She has a master's in engineering from the Imperial College. And right after that, she made a segue into finance. And she's worked a couple of years in finance before going on to found her own company. So that's as much as I can tell you. So she's going to furnish you with some more information as well. Hi, Yanmo. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, Muiwa. Thanks for having me. Hope you're well.
All right. What can you tell us about yourself that we cannot find on a LinkedIn page?
Oh, wow. What can I tell you about myself that I can't find on I like to travel. You can't find that on a LinkedIn page.
All right.
I really enjoy traveling.
Since we're keeping LinkedIn in the conversation, one thing I was curious about is how did you go from a degree in engineering, a master's degree in engineering, to finance? How did that happen? How difficult was that switch? It would just be great to get your thinking along that.
So it wasn't that difficult, in that it's similar to the extent that you're good with numbers, right? But how did I make the switch? So I was studying engineering and I realized that I didn't like it. So I knew engineering was not for me. So I started doing various internships in various industries and all of that. And then when I moved to Nigeria, I did NYSC in the Ministry of Power, Works and Housing. That's kind of an infrastructure ministry of sorts. And when I was finishing my NYSC, someone was asking about, what kind of jobs am I looking for, that sort of, and I was saying, I like this infrastructure experience that I have right now, and I would like to, I'd be happy to continue it. And someone suggested, an infrastructure private equity firm, so a company that financed infrastructure projects. And, I applied for a job, and one of the things they said was that if I wanted to do that, I had to start, I had studied for the CFA, and that's essentially how it happened. So I started working in this place, started doing the CFA, and the rest, I guess, is history.
I think you're the only person that can make a switch from a master's degree in engineering to writing a CFA sound pretty easy. But so I'm just going to take your word for it because that sounds as difficult as it gets. So another thing that's curious for me is, how did you get to thinking about a product like Bamboo? Because one thing you hear people say very often in conversations is that when you create things in Nigeria, everything you create is competing against food. So how did you get to this thinking, and how do you like to think about when you hear things like that? What do you think?
So what do I think about everything is competing against food? And but how did I get thinking about what? I didn't hear that part.
About creating Bamboo. What was how did you think about it? How did your team think about it? What were some of the the foundational thinking behind creating something like this?
So I agree with the general statement, and I think of that generally, right? I think people use food as an oversimplification, but at the end of the day, for most people in in a lot of societies, especially in Nigeria, where we're a poorer society, is every dollar you have is competing against necessities, should we say. So, and I think food is standing for necessities generally, and I agree with that. And for us at Bamboo, that's why our aim was to create something that allowed people grow their wealth and actually grow their money and help them to earn real returns. And so if you're able to if you have a little extra money this month and you're able to invest on Bamboo, then maybe next month you have more money to pay for necessities and do other things. And in thinking about that, that's why, for example, our minimum investment amount is just $10. So you're able to get in for as low as $10, and you're able to even invest in stocks with with smaller amounts than that. So we thought it was very, very important for the barriers to entry to be very, very low. And it was also important to just help people get started in the first place. So you don't have to invest every single day. So we're not competing with you eating every 365 days a week, maybe one of those days. And it's a good start.
So how typically do you see people make these really small investments, or do they make these small investments and they get really excited about the thing and start to make bigger investments?
So actually, typically what we find is essentially that most people are like, oh, see us and they think, oh, this random fintech app, let me check if they're going to run away with my money. So maybe they put in a $20, $30 at first to check how it goes. It's very interesting because you see that a lot of people, they test everything around their first time. They do a deposit, they buy a stock, they sell it, they withdraw. And we get some funny customers support messages like, okay, I've withdrawn my money now. I see that you guys are really giving my money. And then people go on to put more money in. So that's one group of user. And I think there are also other users who put more money in, want to just learn a bit about the stock, who puts a little bit of money in at first, want to learn a bit about the stock market. And then after doing that, then they now like, okay, they've gotten, I guess, getting their feet wet, feel a bit more confident, and put more money and get started trading. But yeah.
And so what are some of I presume you'd have gotten some really interesting questions from customers who are worried about you taking their money and running away. It would be great to know some of these interesting questions. What are the questions people asked you at the start as sort of like a test of trust in a sense?
So I think Nigerians are quite blunt, quite vocal. So they do ask you that in like, so they don't beat around the bush. It is how do I know you're not running away with my money? We've had people show up at our physical offices, literally just show up and say, oh, I wanted to check that there's a real company here and there are, real people here, kind of thing. That was very interesting, especially those that happened during the pandemic, because obviously sometimes there was no one there. And they would message support and say, I've been here. Is anybody actually there? I was like, yo, it's lockdown. But yeah, I think, a question we got asked often, especially at the beginning, was about BVNs. So we had to actually do a lot of sensitization to explain that we actually can't do anything with your BVN. Your BVN doesn't give us access to your bank account. We can't take money from your account using your BVN. I mean, we don't even store your BVN in the first place. We only use it for KYC and identity verification. But I think there's a lot of misunderstanding around just how vulnerable you are if people know your BVN, right? And so we had to do a lot of education around that.
Okay, so I'm interested in this KYC and some of these BVN requirements. So what kind of KYC will Bamboo use? What kind of information do you want to get from your customers? And which do you just use one time and you're not using that information? And what is there any sort of information you use for more than just KYC?
So in general, when you log on, so when you open a Bamboo account, what you're really opening, you're opening a US brokerage account. And excuse me, and if you think about it like that, think of all the information you have to get, what you need when you're opening a bank account or you're opening an actual brokerage account. Well, we were like, look, we're a tech company, nobody has time for that. No one is trying to fill the long form, send us passport picture, go and locate a utility. No one wants to do all of that. And so when you give us your BVN, we're able to pull the KYC information. We need to just verify you. So and that's essentially it. But that's for KYC. We use it to open your brokerage account, and that's it, right? But we also like to collect some other information on our users, and that information is, US legal requirements. So if you've gone through our onboarding process, you'll see that we'll ask you questions like about your risk appetite, your net worth, how liquid you are, that kind of thing. And that helps us profile the kind of people that are using the app, and also helps us, tailor eventually will help us tailor investment suggestions to you. For example, if you put in the beginning that you're a low risk person, maybe we won't show you some super high risk opportunities. Or if you put that you're, very high risk, you might be not interested in some fixed income thing with smaller returns. So that sort of thing.
Okay, so I mean, right now, Bamboo users can only buy stocks in Nigeria and the US. Are there
just the US actually?
Just the US. I assume that there's some complexity. What's the most complex part of this process, for instance? Because I mean, you're trading across basically two currencies. What are the where does it get tricky, basically? Where does it get tricky for you as the owner of the app?
Well, I mean, I guess a lot of quote unquote where it gets tricky would have to be the tech. If something goes wrong on some end, users, from the user end, they just see error, they see something isn't working. And a lot of times it could be just like one small thing that has like caused a bug or caused whatever technical issue, and that's it. But then at the same time, I feel like technical stuff is quite easy to, it's quite easy to relatively easy to fix. You're able to get it done, quite quickly. A lot of that is sort of to some degree within our control, even if it takes time. I think where it gets a little tricky from a founder point of view and thinking about Nigeria point of view is, like you mentioned, we're moving money from Naira, converting FX all the time. And at that point, from like a long-term thinking about, Nigeria point of view, sometimes you have to think, what does this look like going forward? But,
So how do you manage that? Is there any, again, I'm just curious about as to the Naira dollar thing, are there any complexities? How do you worry about it? And how do you worry about, for instance, Nigeria with its multiple exchange windows? How do you work around that specifically?
So right now we have, a payments partner. Flutterwave is our payments partner. And so they help us a lot with all our conversions, with moving our money. So for most of our stuff, Flutterwave is our payments partner. Otherwise, we also allow users to deposit in dollars as well, because like you mentioned, there are various exchange rates windows and just various exchange rates. And sometimes when we give users the exchange rates we get from Flutterwave, they're like, oh, I don't like the exchange rate, this exchange rate is bad. And we always give people the opportunity to source their own dollars and deposit in dollars, so that they're also not wholly dependent on us for their dollar supply to buy the US.
Okay, so it's hard to talk about FX without talking about, regulation and regulatory issues in Nigeria. So for the people listening who missed that part of the news, early in the year, Chaka, which is an investment app, was suspended by the SEC, that's Nigeria's Securities and Exchange Commission, over some regulatory issues and some licenses. So it would just be interesting because you play basically in the same space as well. How have you worked around regulation? In Nigeria, regulation sometimes has like some negative connotations. What's your thinking around it? How do you try to stay in the good books of the regulators, so to speak? And how are you thinking long-term with all the regulatory conversations in Nigeria as a whole?
I think in Nigeria and generally, regulation is always a big risk and is always a big factor that you have to consider. I think, especially for startups, smaller tech companies, everyone does their best to try and be abreast of what the regulators are doing. For us, it's super important to let our regulators know what we were doing. Or actually, let me rephrase, it was super important to let the people we imagine to be our regulators and let us know what we're doing, keeping them abreast, asking, trying to ask, what they asking what their thoughts were, just keeping abreast of whatever the regulation was going to be generally. But I think that is as far as you can go. You can't prevent shocks, you know, like sitting here and then a circular comes out that just changes your whole day, that sort of thing. I think it goes with this. It goes with the territory. It's one of the risks
And
of
so what do
doing
you,
business
I
here.
wonder what you tell investors about that sort of risk. What do you tell investors about, well, this, I mean, it's Nigeria, some regulatory thing could happen. How do you sort of, like, just sort of hedge yourself against that sort of shock? How do you, is that possible?
So I think especially with especially now, and especially over the past, I don't know, maybe year, 2 years or so, you just have to say it plainly. I don't think you need to say too much because Nigeria has already shown themselves. So you don't have to say more than, oh, regulation is a risk. I don't think any investor is going to be like, oh, how? What do you mean? I mean, there's we have ample
Examples.
examples of where regulation was a risk, and at the end of the day, I think what everyone just hopes for is regulation that makes things clearer and helps people know, helps all of us know the best. For us is just explaining that our only hedge is trying to be in contact with regulators, letting them know what we're doing, keeping them abreast of any information, trying to be ahead of any shocks, and trying to hopefully avoid shocks. But
I mean, speaking of the future and uncertainty and all of that, so it will be great to sort of know, like, what's for you, what's the future for Bamboo? What's the big thing for the next 5 years? What are some of the big things you're trying to achieve?
the main thing we're trying to achieve at Bamboo is enabling investments. We want Africans anywhere in the world to be able to invest in any currency and be able to earn real returns. That is super duper important for us. But in terms of the exact ways we do that, our exact roadmap, the exact investment opportunities, that's really up to our users. We're essentially we build the app for you, we build the app for all our users. And what we ask people is, if there's anything you'd like to see on the Bamboo app, if there's anything you think we're not doing well, if there's anything you think we need to do better, please send us an email at support@investbamboo.com. And we take all feedback, we collect all requests, and that's essentially what informs our roadmap.
It's difficult to speak to people these days and not speak about the pandemic and the effect it had on their business. For some businesses, it really drove growth. So did people start investing more because they were sitting down at home, or was the uncertainty starting to make people keep their money in the bank and not want to do anything with it? What's your opinion?
So the pandemic definitely drove growth in our business generally. So I think across investing, across the investment landscape, more and more people were investing in 2020. I think even Robinhood, the US platform, spoke about an increase in number of investors during the pandemic. And I mean, there'll be people will have different opinions about why, right? People are stuck at home, so they have more time to focus on investing and that kind of thing. But there's also the fact that the market started to do quite well. And then there's also the fact that it was also a very interesting time, I think, in the market, right? It was in the news. So I don't know if it's because run Bamboo, but I feel like the stock market was just in the news more. It was, if we see something like the GameStop AMC thing of a few weeks ago, that was like almost a phenomenon where everyone was interested. People were actually caring what the stock market was doing as a mainstream thing, really random. So I think generally that is so for us as well, the pandemic was great the pandemic was great. More and more people were investing. more people were investing, and and it was great as well because we were able to build our community. People were able to learn more from each other, and it was fantastic. But also,
sorry, you spoke about GameStop, and it's hard to not stop you at GameStop because I don't think I've read so many think pieces in my life. On one hand, the people versus the hedge funds, the common man versus the institutions that be. What's your personal? Not like this is not company speak. What's your own personal opinion? Like, what's your own personal opinion? And I'm also curious about one other thing, but I asked that right after this. So, what's your personal opinion? Who is it a victory for? The common man? Does it serve anybody's purpose if a hedge fund goes down because of a bunch of Redditors?
How I feel about it personally. So I wasn't really thinking about it as the common man versus. For me, it's a victory for the people that made money. And so the guy that started it, I mean, he had a couple $1,000s. So I don't know about the common man, but it's a victory for him and how he made money. I'm sure on the other side of the shorts, there were also some hedge funds and some big corporations too that were making money. There were, so at the end of the day, I think just fundamentally, I think it's a victory for the people that were making money, and it's a loss for the guys that lost money. But
okay, so what do you, when the markets are bullish, everybody wants to get in. And nobody wants to remember that it's possible for the market to correct. Nobody wants to, it starts to feel like some sort of game to a lot of people. How do you keep people grounded in a crazy bull run where everybody's making money? How do you remind people sometimes that, look, don't throw in all your life savings and absolutely all the money you have? What does that feel like?
So I think it's various things. I think right now, especially I think what we try to do is we try to talk a lot to people about long-term investing. So anytime you hear me speaking about investing, generally, I'm talking about long-term investing. I don't even have much, to say about trading every day, the back and forth, throwing. And so a lot of that thinking as well when you're thinking about long-term investing is automatically knowing that, look, stocks are risky assets. I always say that. And you have to be ready for it to go up and go down. But over a long period of time, you can trust that if you build good companies, then they will go up. And that's my general thinking. In general, during a bull run, obviously it's exciting because everybody is making money. But I think what has also happened during this period is there's been volatility. So you'll have people who are coming in on days where everything is up, and then there'll be like 2 days where everywhere red. Literally even yesterday, someone was like, "Oh, yeah, I'm not putting my bamboo up again. Everywhere is looking red," and I was like, you know what? I think those days are actually fantastic because they just help you learn a little bit about your investment character. It's very easy to say, "Oh, I'm a great investor. I can hold when the market is green." But 1 or 2 days of red help you remember, okay, let me relax. So I'm like, let me not throw away all my money, all those sort of things. So that's sort of, those are like the two different ways, talking about long-term investing and then the random shocks that help people remember that money can go. And then I think, especially in communities, so we try to build like a big Telegram community. And I think even in there, people are very, very helpful, I guess, give feedback, give advice. In true Nigerian fashion, there's always someone that would say, "I don't lose your money," or someone that's come to say, "Oh, they lost money," that sort of thing. So I think people are still grounded.
How do you keep your head when, it's crazy when you open your app and everything is red. How do you keep your head on a day like that? How do you not, and everybody tells you don't panic. Nobody tells you exactly how not to. Because if you open your app 3 days in a row and you're seeing the thing going red and it's showing you like, oh, 20% has been wiped off, how do you remember? It would be great to know how you remember to just say, hey, do you close the app and just leave it for a bit and come back to it in a few weeks? What do you do?
So I think people's personalities are different. So I'm a big believer in the fact that you haven't lost money until you sold. So I actually have the opposite problem personally. I have the opposite problem for most people. When my app is red, I can't sell anything. I'm always hopeful that my money is coming back. So I'm always looking. I'll be looking, trying to see, and so I'm the worst kind of person who's probably holding on to a sinking, can be holding on to a sinking ship, hoping and hoping and hoping. But I think what I always tell people, assuming you're a long-term investor, is that you should know why you bought a stock in the first place. Is it for whatever the reason? You should know why you bought a stock, and maybe even write it down somewhere so you always remember, or put a note in your notes app, just all the stock you bought and why. And fundamentally, if nothing has changed about your original investment thesis, or you haven't seen, if nothing has changed by your original investment thesis, you shouldn't sell, is my essential thinking. If you still think it's a good company, you still think everything is going great, all the reasons you bought it are still true, then you shouldn't sell just because there's one bad day and one red day, because that, odds are it's going to come back up. The only time I ever say don't listen to that is if when you've seen that there's a better opportunity out there and you need that cash from a certain asset, and then I'll say, okay, yeah, sure, go ahead and sell, go ahead and sell, and put the cash in something else. But you haven't lost money until you sold, right?
Okay, so I hear a lot of think long term. Is it possible what are people who are looking to invest for the medium term or for the short term? What is in it for them? Should they just only think of it as long term or nothing? Or is there something what is the thinking around, like, say, medium term investing?
I think medium. So I think medium to long is like similar. If you're thinking about medium as about a year, right? A year or two.
Okay. Yeah, a year or two.
Yeah, if say medium. So I think it's same thing for long-term investing, as just being able to invest in good companies and trust that they'll correct back, essentially. So a good way to put it is, for example, I bought a lot of stock at the start of last year. So I was one of the people who was buying who bought a chunk of stock in January, February. And I'm pretty sure I bought, I bought a lot, and a week later, the crash happened. The corona pandemic stock market crash. And my portfolio was down about 40%. Yeah, 30, 40%. And it was down in that way for weeks, right? And it was it was down like that for weeks and weeks and weeks. And so
do
in
you
that
check
kind
your
of thing,
portfolio at all during those intervening weeks, or do you just pretend it doesn't exist?
so interesting, that's when I check my portfolio the most. I'm checking to see, okay, have we made more money back? Is more money coming back? That kind of thing. But when my portfolio is doing well, I'm less inclined to check it, because I don't have to be putting my mind in prayer. But yeah, and so that sort of thing. So imagine that if I was a short-term investor, there's no, I would have been stuck. I would have been being forced to sell when my portfolio is 40% down. It would have been a total mess. And I would have been so unhappy. So that's why I talk about medium to long-term investing, in that obviously if you're doing short-term and you have some flexibility, then of course, if you see something that you think is a good opportunity, you can put the money in. If you have some sort of a plan on when you want to take it out, assuming you know what you want to do. Short-term investing is a lot harder and requires a lot more,
skill.
You have to put your mind there more, should we say, and think about it more often. But on a long to medium term, then you're not forced to sell in a bad market. You're not if you're doing every week, or you've gone to go and put money you need for your rent, or something big like that. Now you're selling stock in the middle of a total red. You're losing money, essentially. There's a large possibility that you can lose money.
Okay, so another thing I'm curious about is what does expansion look like? And we're seeing a trend of fintech apps start out doing one thing and then tacking on other pretty interesting things, just becoming larger services than what they start out doing. So is that a route Bamboo would take? What are you thinking generally about expanding?
I think it's, yes, in terms of countries you want to launch in. in Ghana and Kenya very soon, and in other markets. And in terms of product, it's like I mentioned earlier, it would depend on what users want and what, the kind of things users say, oh, this is what would make my Bamboo experience better. And we'll try our best to do that. So our company is very user first. We try and listen to our users and try and essentially give them what they want so they keep coming back.
Okay, so any thinking about helping people trade on the Nigerian Stock Exchange, for instance? Is that the direction you're thinking of, or is that on the cards?
It's definitely on the cards. Would you like to trade? It's definitely on the cards. It was more urgent. It was on the cards right at the beginning, quite urgently, and then we got different feedback that users were not necessarily as pressed for it immediately. So we've done other stuff. But if this is something that you think is super urgent, and you would like, then please send us an email.
Would you say that investors are not as excited about the Nigerian Stock Exchange? Is that I mean, you said something about it not being urgent. What would you say the interest in the Nigerian Stock Exchange is?
I guess the current sentiment is that people are not as excited in the Nigerian Stock Exchange, and so yeah, that's the current sentiment.
I was going to ask, so what really interesting industries? So now I understand that even in the US, Bamboo picks 3,000 stocks. So how do you determine which so you're sort of helping your customers whittle it down? That's how it works, yes?
It's helping them. What do you mean? I missed that.
Okay, so it's how many? Can I buy any and every stock on, say, the New York Stock Exchange, everything?
Oh, no, okay, yes. So you can, no, we have about 3,000 stocks on the platform. And essentially what we don't currently offer are penny stocks. And and we don't offer stocks with a market capitalization. No, let me rephrase that actually. We don't offer most stocks with a market capitalization below $1 billion. So if the market cap is below $1 billion, then it has to be quite actively traded stock and have high volume.
Okay, so go big or go home. So what's the most difficult part of getting to this point as a company and as a co-founder, as someone who runs a business? What are some of the difficult parts of getting here?
And here being just building the app?
Right now, like now you have a product that's attracting attention, that has gotten a fair number of users, so it feels like at least some part of the journey has started. And what were the most difficult parts of getting here?
Well, I think honestly, I guess a lot of our business, we launched at the end of 2019. So we've been in a pandemic for most of our business and, going, fully remote. We had to do fundraising during a pandemic. We moved the team fully remote, all of that. So I think that was quite challenging initially, but just getting people to, being able to work, being able to produce results while still dealing with, an unprecedented worldwide.
Two things about being in having to do with the pandemic. What was remote work? What was switching to remote like for your team? Did that come super easy? Are you still working remotely or doing a hybrid?
It was quite easy for us to switch to remote in terms of actually, we already work with Slack. We already had Zoom calls, etc. So that part of it was quite easy in terms of just switching, we're not going to office anymore. Everyone just said, okay. I think the hard part was, there's something about being in an office that makes there's a camaraderie, it's easier to bounce ideas off each other. It helps, for some people, it helps them produce results, etc. So it was just trying to help people feel not alone, help people figure out, the work-life balance, should we say. Are we still working remotely? Half and half. We are working, everyone, so we're essentially running a you can work from where you want model right now. So people who feel like going into the office because they're going stir crazy, essentially the office is open, and if you want to be in there, then you can go there. But
so what are you seeing with your team? Do people prefer to work from home, or are people coming more to the office?
People definitely prefer to work from home because traffic. Nobody wants to have to sit in traffic.
Yeah, commuting in Lagos is hell.
Yeah, there's no point. I went to the office yesterday for the first time in a month, and only one other person was there, and she was like, she just came in because she was tired of being at home, so she hadn't been there for months either. So yeah.
Would you consider like making a switch to maybe a once a month situation where people just come as maybe different teams or one team, and maybe from a workspace everybody just hangs out for a day and goes home?
Why?
I mean, if every other day people are not coming into the office, could be a thing.
So I'm not sure. I think it'll depend on like the team. I'm very big on people deciding what they feel like doing. Just because like if I have work to do and maybe I just want to sit in pajamas all day at work, I don't want you to drag me to the office for by force by force interactions. If we're gonna have a social thing, then let's plan a work social thing. But don't like drag me to the office for interaction.
Speaking of social interactions, I read often that a large part of raising money is in making connections with people, speaking, actually sitting down for maybe a couple of minutes to explain things to people. So how do you raise money in a pandemic where everybody is sitting at home, doing it via Zoom calls? What does it force you to do? Does it force you to speak more? Does it force you to try to make quicker connections? What are your experience? Does it change?
I guess everything's on Zoom now. So I think the hardest thing about Zoom calls for everyone is it's harder to make like connections, right? To make those like people emotional kind of connections. You just have to do more work to make those connections. And I think with fundraising, at least from I can't really speak on fundraising is like outside a pandemic because I haven't had to do it.
That's
yet.
Interesting.
But so I'm not really sure. I'm probably not a great speaker on the difference. But for us, we definitely had to do a lot of calls. A lot of emailing. It's definitely harder to. I think it's definitely harder. But I'm probably not the best person to say what the difference is.
Okay, so we're going to take questions in a bit. We have a bunch of questions here. We have a lot of questions here. So my own last question is, what industries would you say, I'm just curious about this, what industries would you say you're excited about for the next few years, especially in terms of right now in Nigeria, fintech is where a lot of excitement is happening. In Africa, from last year to this year, we've seen some interesting things happening in the clean technology space. A bunch of solar companies are raising money. So just on the African continent, where do you look to sometimes and you're like, oh, this is interesting. This other sector is interesting, outside of the regular fintech sector that everybody's excited about.
Are you talking with respect to just, are you talking like with respect to tech generally? Or are you just saying sectors?
Yes, with respect to tech.
So I find what the people doing agri-tech are doing quite interesting. And, I think that's quite cool. And I'm actually excited to see how it continues, how it continues to grow and continues to play out. I'm actually quite interested in this space. From afar anyway, I don't know much about it, so you can't ask me any questions. But from afar, just looking at the space, thinking about it, I'm curious to see, because there's, I think the gaps are obvious, right? And it's just really exciting to see what happens in the next couple of years.
Okay, so let us get into a few of the questions. So one of the questions here is from Victor Francis, and he says, oh, he's a lover of investments. He says, I use the Bamboo app virtually every day. So is it okay to let us know how you manage moving funds between Nigeria to your partner, Drive Wealth?
So like I mentioned earlier, Flutterwave is a payments partner. So when you give us Naira, Flutterwave helps us convert it and gives us dollars, and those dollars go to Drive Wealth into your brokerage account.
Okay, another question is around, interestingly, your expansion plans. So is there a timeline to this expansion? You said Ghana, you said you were thinking Ghana, you're thinking Kenya. Is there like some timeline to this? When are you looking at launching in all these places?
Hopefully soon. Hopefully we have something to announce very soon, actually. So fingers crossed, and yeah.
Okay, it's still like
Watch this
within the
space.
year or next year.
Oh, you know, soon.
Okay, we're just going to call it soon and not give it any other name. So somebody here has an interesting question that I'm sure you've heard a lot of times. We spoke about it at the beginning of our conversation, and it's around trust. And again, like I asked you, what are some of the questions people ask you every day around trust? It says, what happens to my money if Bamboo closes down today? How do I get my money back? That's a really straightforward, hit the nail on the head kind of question.
Bruh, I've had $1 for every time someone has asked me that question. So when you open a Bamboo account, you open a US brokerage account with our partner DriveWell. So if Bamboo closes down today, your money, your stocks, everything is still in your brokerage accounts with DriveWell. So your Bamboo account number that you have on the app is also your DriveWell account number. So you can so first of all, if something happens and Bamboo closes down, we have a legal responsibility to help you, set up your accounts with help you get in touch with DriveWorld and help you recover your funds if you want to, help you decide what you want to do. That's that's the main thing essentially. But still, your account is with DriveWorld and your money is safe, so you don't have to worry about that. And DriveWorld is an SEC registered broker and a member of FINRA and a member of the US SIPC. And what all these mean is basically they're properly regulated by US regulators. And if anything happens to your money in your accounts with them, it is insured up to $500,000 and up to $250,000 for cash. So you don't have to worry about that.
Okay, so can you and I strike a deal where I take part of the proceeds every time you get $1 if someone asks you this question? What do I have
As
to
long
do
as
to
you're
get?
also answering for me, then yes.
We can make that happen. Happy to answer. Okay, so someone else also asked, we see your competitors struggling with SEC. Could you let us know how difficult it is to get such regulatory approvals? And are you done with all these approvals?
So essentially, for us, we work in partnership with Lambert Capital, a Nigerian broker that is registered by the SEC and all of that. So essentially, we're able to piggyback off their license and able to, work with the regulators with essentially their backing. So we have a partnership agreement with them. So in terms of, from point of view of the SEC, we have covered our bases, should we say.
Okay, so all the bases are covered there because you're picking off your partner's license?
Yes, so we covered up. Yes, so we are essentially partnered with the Nigerian registered broker.
But I mean, another part of this question, which you haven't spoken to, which I'm even curious about, is how difficult are these regulatory approvals?
So I mean, it depends on what you're doing. It depends on how you're trying to do it. It depends on, I guess it always depends on a lot of factors. So I think difficult. I don't know if difficult is the exact right word as complex. I mean, there's probably just the general. In the first place, you first have to know what regulatory approvals you need, who your regulator is, for example, which regulator you're even supposed to be talking to in the first place. So I think it's those kind of things, the like lack of clarity, the not initially knowing where to go. So those are the things that make it complex in the first place. So I don't know if difficult is the right word, but definitely
Okay,
complex.
so it's not difficult, it's more like an absence of clarity.
I think, and then even when it's clear, sometimes it becomes complicated in terms of.
Okay, sounds exactly like Nigeria.
Yeah.
So that sort of answers another question someone asked about if Bamboo itself is currently regulated by the SEC. So that speaks to that as well. So yes, so Adebayo asks, is there a community one can learn about investing? How can he join?
So we have a Telegram community.
Okay, great. I remember you mentioned that you've only raised money you've only tried to raise money as a business in a pandemic. So you're a first-time founder. What's that like?
what joining? Sorry, give me 1 second. I'm
Okay,
just
go
putting.
ahead.
Yes, right now we're just putting the link to the Telegram group in the
Okay.
Zoom chat, so I don't get. Yeah, in terms of you asked me about fundraising.
Yeah, no, I was asking specifically about being a first-time founder.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, what's that like? Because we spoke to Tosin last week, and one of the things he said was entrepreneurship is not for everybody. And he was like, I know a lot of people say this a lot of times, but I'm not joking. This is not for everybody. So how do you go from a 9 to 5 to deciding, hey, I want to start my own thing anyway, even though I know this is difficult?
I It just kind of happened, and that I was working in 9 to 5. My co-founder was already working on, Bamboo, and we spent a lot of time talking about it, and he'd show me something. I would like give him feedback. I was very interested in the product as they were building it because I wanted to use Bamboo. I needed an app to buy stocks. So it was very much I'm interested in this. Once it's done, I really want to be your client, be your user. So I was very, very involved in it, and it just sort of happened. He was like, "Oh, will you come and be my co-founder?" And I was like, let's talk about this when I get back, because I was actually traveling at the time. And we spoke about it, and I said yes. So I decided very, very quickly. So it wasn't like a well thought out decision, probably.
Well, any fears? I mean, any fears, and I mean, what would you tell anybody to say take the risk? I mean, leave your 9 to 5. What's the worst that could happen? What are some of the unique learnings that you've had up till this moment?
I think first the answer is no. I wouldn't tell you to, like, leave your 9 to 5 and do this
Why?
unless you actively wanted to. I think this is something you have to actively want to do. And because it's gonna get hard, there are gonna be days you're like, why am I doing this? So you have to actively want to do it, and you have to be doing something you actually care about. I think
What's one day you've
there's
had what's one day that's challenged your, do I actually want to do this? Because you just said that. So what's one day that has made you ask, do I really want to do this?
I think about that often, actually. I think about that very, very often, and it depends on various things. But I mean, I don't think it's ever a whole day. I think it's something that happens, for example, and you're just like, why am I doing this kind of thing? And I think that's more it. I don't think, I haven't had whole days where I'm like, or have I actually? I'm not thinking about it in terms of, I can't think of a specific day, just mainly
No
because
specific event,
at least I
no
get that
one really difficult
I get that
moment where it's
feeling
like, ah.
often.
So the feeling never really goes away?
I think that might be it. I think so. That might actually be a more accurate. That, like, it's almost like a constant. Why am I doing this? But then But then good things happen, and then you remember, users give you feedback about how much they like your product, or how they made money using your app, and then you're really happy again, and you're happy you do this, and you want to be doing this. So yeah, it depends. I think it's like having a child.
Okay, I'm interested in this analogy.
Yeah, something like having a child, and like how like you have a child that like you like love and you want to like see grow and you want the best for them, but then the child is also like probably having like a 2-year-old, and then it's like child is still annoying and they do dumb stuff and they break things, but so I think that's
Okay.
more. So it's like, if when parents are like, well, I wanted to leave my baby in the grocery store, they don't actually mean they wanted to leave their baby.
Yeah, okay. That's a clearer analogy. They don't
Exactly.
actually mean that, they're just really frustrated or
Exactly.
exasperated in that moment. So I totally understand that. So someone asks, how have you managed? I feel like we've answered this question, but I'm just going to ask anyway. How have you managed Forex volatility with customers and in managing the company's financial positioning?
So first thing is we don't mix customer money with our money ever. So at no point does customer money, affect our company financial position. I just feel like it's very important to make clear, first and foremost. And like I mentioned, Flutterwave is our payments partner. They've been great helping with money movement and with conversions. And we have various partners just in case. So we have backups of backups, so we're fine.
Okay, so I know we've spoken about the future and expansions, but somebody's thinking about the future, and says, when is Bamboo going public? And also follows up with, or how else can we invest in your company?
Going public is very, very far. Well, no, maybe not very, very far. Actually, you never know. Never say never. Touch wood and all of that. We're currently only taking, and we're not currently fundraising right now. But if we were fundraising, we would announce that we were doing a round and we're raising money. We're currently raising, I guess, venture money. So it's from angel investors or VC funds, that sort of thing.
Okay, and somebody else also, since we're still talking about raising money, and is asking about, did Bamboo raise money before starting? And yeah, that's, since we're talking about investing.
Yeah, I mean, we're a venture-backed business, so we raised money to exist.
Okay, so I think you've answered this already. Someone asked what the lowest amount you can invest in Bamboo is, and you said from $10?
$10, exactly.
$10 thereabouts. Okay. So yeah. So we have quite a bit of questions here. And okay, so let me just get to some of the interesting ones, and then I'll just mix it up and ask some of the ones I find really interesting first. What is the exit plan / policy? This is from Julie Zubi. She says, what is the exit plan or policy? Again, it feels really like a far down the road question, but it's just interesting anyway.
What exit plan? What policy?
So what's no, I think this person is just interested in what, how Jason always says, when founders start businesses, they should always start with the exit in mind. For the exit for investors, I guess is what she's asking about, which is, I guess, why somebody else is asking about going public. I don't know. So yeah, that.
Oh, wow.
That feels like a difficult question.
I was saying that we're still building, so I'm not even thinking about that. So you see how my mind didn't even go there. I was so confused for a second. Okay,
so moving on. So what kind of people would you say use Bamboo? Is what Alexander wants to know. High net worth individuals, millennials, Gen Z. What's the average investment amount for the typical Bamboo user?
That's such an I feel like I'm an investor call. Wow.
Yes.
Honestly, there's such a wide range. We have people from 18 to 60 something years old. So anyone over 18 can and does use Bamboo. And we also have a wide range of, investors. We have people with, $10 portfolios. We also have people with portfolios of hundreds of thousands of dollars. So it's honestly a very, very wide range. And so at the same time, the average portfolio size, I would need to check what the average portfolio size is for people. But that's essentially it. I guess the answer to that question really is many different kinds of people investing in many different things with many different characteristics.
Okay, so someone also, this is Bonfake, who's asking, would Bamboo be interested in partnerships with local firms which are looking to open up opportunities for investing in the US equities market to their clients, or is this already happening?
Yeah, we're definitely interested in that. If you're a local, I'm assuming asset management, or you already manage money for people, yes, please send us an email at x@investbamboo.com.
Okay, so I have this is interesting because it's such a simple question. Someone says, I have the fear of losing money. How can you advise me to overcome these? Because for me, Do you advise anybody to get over the fear of losing money? Or is that fear healthy? Is that the sort of fear that keeps people in check? Does it temper sort of what people do? Or should people, what would you say to that?
You should be able to losing money. Losing money is scary. But I think it definitely just depends on, it depends on context. But studies have shown that humans feel the loss. So essentially, if I gave you $1 million or you won $1 million, if you won $1 million or I gave you $1 million, or let's say if you made $1 million, you wouldn't be as happy as you would be sad if you lost $1 million. So there's a human nature makes you feel losses more. And so probably and that's why the fear of losing money for most people is normally stronger than, the excitement from the possibility of making money. That's one. I think for me, I wouldn't say get over your fear of losing money. I would need more context, honestly, to give advice in that scenario, if that makes sense. As in, like, the more I think about it.
Okay,
because are you missing out on?
In my head, you should not lose the fear. In my head, you should not lose the fear of losing money. I think it tempers your rashness.
You definitely shouldn't lose the fear, but I think there's an argument to be made that, depends, as I said, I needed context. You might want to reduce the fear. Are you missing out on opportunities? Are you overly paranoid? So are you like, and what does the fear make you do? Does the fear make you do nothing? I think then that's bad. What fear should be making you do is researching more, thinking through your investments more, being more calculated, I guess, in your investing.
Okay, so another question is, did you envisage this level of adoption before starting? Or what was, and this other part of the question is also really interesting for me, or what was the plan to encourage people to invest? How do you speak to people about saying, look, I mean, I know that food is the number one thing everything is competing against in Nigeria, but hey, still put money here and still buy some stock and still try to grow your wealth or preserve your capital. How do you speak to people about investing money?
I guess, did we expect this level of adoption before starting? We were hopeful that a lot of people would want to use the app, and they would. I think because we built it for ourselves and for a lot of them are people we knew that there was definitely a market that existed for people who wanted to do this. And our initial plans were encouraging people to invest. Our first plan was really just giving people the access, right? And our thinking was, if you give people the access, give them the opportunities, they would invest and they would use it. So, and it's worked out.
Okay, that makes sense. That's an interesting way to think about it. Another question here that is pretty interesting is, it says, how do you give stock recommendations and do you provide information about the stocks listed on your apps? And then another interesting part to it is, are there mutual funds you can invest in the US listed on your app as well?
We have exchange traded funds on the app. So they're like mutual funds, but they trade on an exchange. So they're called ETFs, and you can just search for ETFs on the app, and you'll probably be able to get whatever exposure you want via an ETF.
Someone wants to know about how to introduce Bamboo to a community.
Again, I think generally for partnership kind of stuff, if you can please just send an email to x@investbamboo.com. I'm going to put it in the chat. So a community partnering for your users, all of that.
Okay, so someone asked a question about what's it like being a woman in tech in Africa, and what's that like, especially when you're trying to get funding or investment for your startup, and like, what are there things you can share that help with handling this? So it's about being a woman in technology, and specifically about seeking funding or investment for your business as a woman, and how specifically you handle some of the challenges you faced?
So yeah, in terms of answering your question about being a woman in tech, I think for a lot of people, especially depending on which section of the industry you work in, the what's the word now? The primary thing is there's just not that many people. There's just not that many of you, right? So there's probably less representation, etc., and that sort of thing. But for us, with regards to fundraising, like I mentioned earlier, I actually didn't have to do much fundraising because my co-founder did a lot of the fundraising for us. So we split it into in that vein. But I think the advice I would say in terms of I'm assuming, so I didn't see who's put the question, but I'm assuming it's a woman who sorry, I'm assuming it's a woman who's interested in tech or already in tech and wants to take part in fundraising. And what I would say is, honestly, generally, just go for it, know your stuff, try and have female forward and supportive investors. And a general thing that's actually true is you want to, right at the start, you want to get investors that you feel are supportive. So if you feel like if you get misogynist vibes from your investor right at the start, you probably don't even want their money because you're kind of stuck with your early investors and they will stress your life, and you don't want that vibes. That's bad vibes.
Okay, so no bad vibes. Okay, so another really interesting question. Someone says, are you sure that the SEC will not come for you? I think we've spoken at length about regulation and how you have all the bases covered. So someone wants you to maybe repeat the email address to contact for partnerships. Maybe you could put that in.
I typed in the chat.
Okay, so please check in the chat. We already have that. So another interesting question is, if I have a trading account already, can I integrate it into the Bamboo app to avoid duplication of accounts at the exchange?
If you have a trading account, I would need a lot more information. But but you can send an email to support@investbamboo.com and they'll be able to help you if they can.
Okay, so another person wants to know when they'll be able to use Bamboo on the web, when the web app will work.
That is actually soon. I know we've been saying soon for a while, but that's a real soon. Very, very, very soon. I think we should announce that very shortly, actually.
You've told me 3 soons now, so I do not know what timeline to put every time you say soon.
This was one real soon.
Real soon. Okay, the first 2 were soon, and this one is a real soon.
Mm-hmm.
Another question I really like, which I feel like I would even ask this myself, is now someone says now that the market is bearish, what's your advice to a careful investor like me?
Is the market currently bearish? That's interesting. I think I wouldn't say it's bearish yet. We've had like a few red moments.
Few bad days, yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know if it's yet. I think the same thing I said earlier. Invest medium to long term. Know why you're investing. I generally would say, if you've done your research, if you say you're a careful investor, I assume you've done your research, etc. Write down when you buy a stock. Just keep like a investment diary of sorts where you just write down why you bought it. That's all. Yes, it's going to be 2 sentences, just why you bought it. And like I said, that means on red days, just open your little investment diary or notes and just read and remind yourself why you bought this stock. And if nothing has changed about that, then don't sell. If something has changed fundamentally, then sell. That's essentially my thinking. And for a careful investor, do your research. Like I mentioned, do your research, feel good about what you buy.
So how much education would you say you have to do? Because one thing we see quite a lot is people tend to confuse investments for get-rich-quick schemes. A lot of people are looking for opportunities to double their money in like 2 months, in like 1 month, people are looking for like super unrealistic results. How do you manage to sort of help people manage their expectations? One, and how much education would you say you need to do to tell people, look, this is what it is and this is what it's not?
So we're constantly doing education, constantly, for various things. People want to get on the app, they don't know what to buy, they don't know where to start, they don't really understand what investing is. So we're constantly doing education. So we're constantly talking about, have a Bamboo for Beginners course. We have we constantly put out guides to teach you about various industries. On the Telegram group, there's a lot of talking that's going on. We send around newsletters. We have a blog, etc. So we're constantly doing education. I think education is important when money is involved, and it's something like stocks where there's like highs and lows, and like you mentioned, it's very easy to get carried away. So a lot to answer the how much education do we need to do. And I think what is also helpful is as more and more people join the community, as more and more people get interested in this, then people are also able to learn from each other, which I think is fantastic.
Okay, someone says, how do I invest a percentage of my, this is such a confusing question. So how do I invest a percentage of my capital in let's just skip that. So you said there's a, one thing you mentioned that struck me was you said there's a cost for investing for beginners or something along those lines.
Yeah, well, actually, now that I said it out loud, it's not out yet, so it'll be out soon. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry. We've been talking about for so long, I didn't realize that.
So what's the size of your, what's the size of your Telegram community? That's
there are
where other places, and what other places do you have a community, and how much does a community help? Because sometimes I find that I'm a member of some communities sometimes, and I find that I'm guilty of just letting the messages sort of just pile up and disappearing for a while and coming back and feeling like completely lost in the barrage of information. So how is a community like this managed, and how useful would you say it has been to people who are part of your community?
So the first question is, the first question was, how big is our Telegram community? And our Telegram community has almost 7,000 people, 6,800 people in the Telegram community. And so what was the second part of the question? Yeah, 6,800 people, 6,816 people.
Oh, okay. That's a large size.
I'm sorry, I didn't. What was the second part of the question?
And I said, how do you manage, how is a community of 6,800 people moderated? How do you ensure that it's useful to people who join it? Because I feel like if I join a community with almost 7,000 people, I feel like I'm just going to get lost with all the information that's going around.
Well, I mean, with regards to our Telegram community and our communities generally, Ugo, who you probably spoke to from the Bamboo team, and Ugo and Giola are amazing community managers, and Fumi. So a special shout out to Ugo, who manages everything, and Fumi and Giola that deal with actually managing the community. So special shout out to them, because through me, now I'm doing it. In terms of what we try and do, though, people are quite welcoming. What we found that I thought was very, very interesting is people are very willing to teach other people, and which was great. So we see that people are very comfortable asking questions, and people are very comfortable, helping them get started. We also try and host regular, online. Well, if it's on Telegram, I guess that's still online Q&As or events type things, way to help people get started, to help people get started. But that is something we're definitely trying to improve, and we're definitely trying to do better in terms of making it more useful. Oh no, actually, not making it more useful, making it a softer experience in getting in.
Okay, that works. So I have 2 more questions, and then we can just sort of roll towards the end of this event. I find that people seem to be curious about any possible sort of link with the Nigerian Stock Exchange or the SEC. Someone is asking if you'll be able to assist the NSE or the SEC in transferring Nigerian paper shares certificates into online shares anytime soon.
I
Although
know
that feels
nothing
like
about that.
yes, yeah, that feels like a central clearing sort of thing. So
Yeah,
our
that
final
sounds like
question,
yes.
yeah, our final question would be: are there plans to expand into South Africa?
Well, hopefully, I think it's definitely with country expansion as well. If you please send us an email to support@investbamboo.com and that you'd like us in South Africa, we will take that under advisement.
All right. So yeah, we're almost at the close of this event. So a big thank you to you, Yanmo, for joining us and answering pretty much all our questions. Thanks to the audience. You guys have been pretty great. Thanks for the interesting questions. I think I learned a bunch of things from some of the questions that were asked. So that was pretty interesting for me. Thank you. Someone asked at some point if you will be able to find a recording of this event. Yes, you will. We're going to put it on YouTube. We're also going to share an event recap article as well. So if you're more for reading about it, we'll do that. If you're more for watching the actual event, we're also going to send you a YouTube link. So just a reminder that you can get our TC Insights and reports from TC Insights. So we do market intelligence and research, so you could totally do that. And also a reminder to sign up for our newsletter. I hope you signed up to our newsletter, Yanmo. So we have
actually.
Okay, thank you. So we have a newsletter that goes out every day, gets into your inbox at 7 a.m. I particularly like today's newsletter, for instance. He talked about rubies and then Twitter opening up spaces. So the link is right there on the screen. So please sign up for our newsletter. I think that, so please sign up for our TC Daily newsletter. And thank you again for joining us and for giving us like a really interesting event. Again, please take our event survey. Thank you again, Yanmo, and thank you everybody for joining us. So we can just pull the event to a close right now.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, and bye-bye, everybody.